I've always thought that I had a pretty solid marriage. My wife, Jessica, and I had been together for nearly 7 years. We met in college, fell in love over shared interests in music and food, and built a life together. You know, the typical American dream. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that ever made me think she'd betray me. That was until the moment everything began to unravel. It started with the little things. An unusual amount of late nights at work, her phone constantly buzzing with messages, and an air of secrecy that hung around her like a dark cloud. I noticed how she began dressing differently, wearing those fitted dresses that accentuated her curves. At first, I thought it was just her trying to look good for me, a little spark in the relationship. But as the weeks turned into months, those thoughts faded, replaced with annoying suspicion. I tried to brush it off, rationalizing her behavior. She worked hard at her job as a marketing manager, and I should have trusted her. After all, she had never given me a reason not to. But intuition has a nasty way of nagging at you until you finally decide to act. My buddy Mike suggested I check her phone while she was in the shower one night. It was a risky move, but the thought of betrayal consumed me. I sat on the edge of our bed, heart racing, and picked up her phone. The sight that greeted me was a revelation I never wanted to see: flirty texts with my boss, Mark. "Can't wait to see you tonight," read one message, followed by a heart emoji. My stomach dropped. My mind raced. This can't be real. I felt like the ground had been pulled from under me. I wanted to scream, cry, rage against the world for what she was doing to me. But I also felt strangely calm, like I was observing a scene from a movie that had turned dark and twisted. I didn't know what to do next. The confrontation loomed, and with it, a storm that would change everything. When Jess came out of the shower, I was waiting for her, phone in hand, heart pounding. "We need to talk." The moment those words left my mouth, I saw the flicker of worry in her eyes. I knew she had to know the game was up. I tossed her phone onto the bed, and as it landed, I could see her attempt to mask the panic behind her facade. "What's this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but the tremor betrayed me. "Are you really cheating on me with Mark?" She blinked at me, her expression shifting from confusion to pure defiance, like a cornered animal ready to strike back. "That's ridiculous. How could you even think that?" she retorted, her voice drenched in irritation. I could see the gears turning in her mind, crafting lies as she spoke. "Mark and I are just friends. You know how it is, work and everything." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The audacity. I'd seen the texts. There was clearly more to their relationship than just a work friendship. I pressed on, demanding the truth. But instead of coming clean, she spiraled into a web of excuses. "You're just being paranoid. It's all in your head," she said, rolling her eyes. The dismissal stung even more than the betrayal itself. As the confrontation unfolded, I felt my emotions shifting from anger to heartache. I was losing her right before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had invested so much into this relationship, and now it felt like it was crumbling down around me. As she continued to deny the obvious, I felt the walls closing in. I was not just angry, I was heartbroken. All of those years spent building trust, love, and a future together felt like they were being blown away like dust in the wind. I realized that this wasn't just about a betrayal, it was about the future I thought we had together. The man I had been just moments before was forever changed in that instant. But inside that storm of emotions, a flicker of determination ignited. I couldn't let this slide. I was going to take control of my life, and I was going to get my revenge, not just for me, but to show them both that their actions had consequences. After that explosive confrontation, I was left with a whirlwind of emotions: betrayal, sorrow, and a growing sense of anger that I had never felt before. I thought about how we had built our lives together, the late nights spent planning our future, and the dreams we had shared. Now those dreams felt like a cruel joke, but as the initial shock began to wane, clarity started to take its place. I realized I couldn't just sit idly by and let this betrayal define me. I had a decision to make. I could either wallow in this pain or take action. The latter option felt more appealing. I'd always been the guy who followed the rules, who played nice. But I was done playing nice. I decided then and there that I would take control of my life and carve out a new path for myself, one that didn't involve Jessica or Mark. The idea of starting my own company had floated around in my mind for a while, but I had never acted on it. Now, it felt like the perfect way to regain my power. I spent the next few days in a fog of determination. I researched everything I could about starting a business, focusing on what I knew best: digital marketing. I had spent years working under Mark, learning the ins and outs of the industry. I had developed relationships with clients that were worth their weight in gold, and I realized that if I was going to make a fresh start, I could leverage those connections. I also began to take stock of my emotions. I felt angry, yes, but there was also a spark of excitement. I hadn't felt this alive in years. I started drafting a business plan late into the night, pouring my heart and soul into it. I was going to create something from the ashes of my marriage, something that was entirely mine. It was cathartic, a release of all the pent-up frustration I had bottled up for so long. In the following weeks, I meticulously planned everything. I registered my business, secured a small office space, and set up meetings with potential clients. The idea of competing against Mark and taking his clients filled me with a sense of purpose. I would show them both that I was not to be underestimated. I also made sure to reach out to some of Mark's clients, quietly assuring them that I was starting my own venture and offering them a competitive edge. Of course, I kept my interactions casual and friendly, nothing that could tip off Mark or Jessica. I even continued to act like everything was normal at home, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband while my plans simmered beneath the surface. I sat through dinners filled with awkward silence, pretending to be oblivious to what was happening around me. There were moments when I could see her pretending to care, asking about my day, and it made my blood boil. The lies hung thick in the air, and I felt like I was living in a nightmare. But it was during a lunch meeting with one of my potential clients, Sarah, that I realized my plan was beginning to take shape. We clicked immediately, and she expressed genuine interest in what I was offering. I wasn't just selling services. I was offering a fresh perspective and the chance to work with someone who had their best interests at heart. It felt liberating to be seen for my skills instead of being overshadowed by Mark's influence. As I left the meeting, a smile crept across my face. This was it. I was reclaiming my life. As the weeks went by, I managed to pull in a few clients and my business started to gain some traction. I could hardly believe the success I was tasting. It was intoxicating. The more clients I secured, the more I felt like I had taken back control. Meanwhile, I could see the cracks forming in Jessica's facade. She was getting increasingly paranoid, noticing my late nights and the sudden surge of confidence I had adopted. But I was always one step ahead. One evening, as we sat on the couch together, she asked, "What are you up to these days? You seem different." I simply smiled, shrugging it off. Just focusing on work. I could see the tension in her eyes. I thought about how she was sitting there, blissfully unaware of my plans, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She had no idea what was coming. But soon, I began to prepare for the next step in my plan, the execution of my revenge on Mark. I would leverage every connection I had and show him that I was not just a subordinate waiting for approval. I was going to take his clients, and in doing so, I would take a piece of everything he had built. It was going to be a blow to his ego, a reckoning for both him and Jessica. I wanted them to feel the pain of betrayal as deeply as I did. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself consumed by the thrill of my ambition. I was no longer just the heartbroken husband. I was a man on a mission, and nothing was going to stand in my way. With the adrenaline of my new venture propelling me forward, I became increasingly methodical in my approach. The thrill of revenge began to blur with the exhilaration of entrepreneurship. I set a timeline for myself, determined to establish my company and start taking Mark's clients within 3 months. Daily, I worked tirelessly, poring over every detail of my business and refining my strategy. No longer was I the passive husband. I had become an agent of change, orchestrating my own redemption. One evening, after a long day at the office, I decided to invite Sarah out for drinks. She had been one of my first clients and had proven to be not just a business ally, but also someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with. There was a chemistry between us that I hadn't expected. Perhaps it was simply the thrill of newfound freedom, or maybe it was a sign that I was ready to move forward in life. Regardless, I felt alive again, and the weight of betrayal was slowly lifting. As we sat across from each other at a trendy bar downtown, I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Sarah shared stories of her own experiences in marketing, and I could sense her admiration for my ambition. It felt good to be appreciated and respected. It was a stark contrast to the dismissive attitude I had grown accustomed to from Jessica. "How did you manage to get such a great start?" she asked, leaning in, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "It's not easy to get clients when you're just starting out." I smiled, deciding to keep things vague. "Sometimes it's about knowing the right people," I replied, thinking of Mark and the clients I was preparing to steal right from under his nose. As the night wore on, the conversation flowed easily, and we exchanged ideas about potential collaborations. I could feel a spark igniting between us, but I was careful not to let it go too far. My focus was on my company and the vengeance I was crafting, not on diving headfirst into a new relationship. Still, the idea of having someone like Sarah in my life was enticing, a welcome distraction from the chaos I was navigating. Meanwhile, back at home, the tension with Jessica grew palpable. I took note of her increasingly erratic behavior. She was no longer the confident woman I had married. Instead, she seemed frazzled and paranoid, constantly checking her phone and looking over her shoulder, as if expecting me to confront her at any moment. I had become a ghost in my own home, a shadow lurking in a space that once felt warm and inviting. One night, I returned home later than usual after a meeting with a new client. As I entered the house, I found Jessica packing in the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She looked up startled and quickly shoved the phone into her pocket, a guilty look flashing across her face. "Where have you been?" she snapped, a hint of accusation in her tone. "At work," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "What about you? You seem tense." Her eyes narrowed and she opened her mouth to retort but then paused, seemingly weighing her words. I've been trying to figure things out, with us." I couldn't help but scoff. "Figure things out, it's pretty clear what's been going on." Her face flushed and she opened her mouth to defend herself, but I didn't want to hear another excuse. I had heard enough. Instead, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, bewildered and frustrated. I was no longer interested in dragging this relationship out. I had my sights set on a future that no longer included her. With each passing day, I focused more on my business and my new connections. I began to develop relationships with clients who were previously under Mark's wing. They were unsure of their future with him, and I was there with promising new ideas and a fresh approach. It was exhilarating to watch my business grow, and I felt a surge of confidence I hadn't felt in years. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to strike at Mark. One afternoon, I found out he was meeting with a major client, one that I knew would be the key to a significant revenue boost for my business. I decided it was time to make my move. I reached out to that client, positioning my services as a better, more affordable alternative to Mark's agency. I crafted a compelling proposal that highlighted my unique approach and tailored strategies, and I sent it over with a personal note. I knew Mark would never see it coming. The thrill of sealing the deal, knowing that I was actively undermining my wife's affair partner, was enough to send a rush of adrenaline through my veins. As I awaited the client's response, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This would be my first significant victory against Mark, and I envisioned the look on his face when he realized he was losing clients to me. The thought alone made me giddy. A few days later, I received the email I had been waiting for. The client wanted to meet. I couldn't contain my satisfaction as I read the words confirming the meeting. I was ready to put my plan into action, and the impending confrontation felt like a tidal wave of liberation crashing over me. With each victory, I was not only taking back control of my career, I was reclaiming my sense of self, my worth, and my identity. The time had come to make my mark on this industry, and I was more determined than ever to show Mark and Jessica that their betrayal would not only be their downfall but would also elevate me to heights I had never dreamed possible. It was time to execute the revenge that had been brewing inside me, and I was more than ready to deliver. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt a rush of anticipation mixed with nervous energy. I arrived at the client's office early, giving myself plenty of time to prepare. I wore my best suit, the one that made me feel sharp and authoritative. I took a moment in the restroom to collect my thoughts, running through the presentation in my mind. This was not just another business meeting. It was my chance to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As I entered the conference room, I was greeted by the client, Lisa, who seemed genuinely enthusiastic. She was a smart, savvy businesswoman, and I knew she was looking for a fresh perspective. I could sense her doubts about Mark's agency, and I was ready to capitalize on that. "Thanks for meeting with me today," I said, extending my hand with confidence. "I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss how we can elevate your marketing strategy." Once we sat down, I launched into my presentation. I laid out a clear vision for her business, what I could offer, and how I would tailor my approach to address her unique needs. I could see Lisa's interest peaking as I spoke. I highlighted the innovative tactics I planned to implement, emphasizing how my fresh ideas could bring measurable results. With every word, I felt the adrenaline coursing through my veins, reminding me of my purpose, not just to win her over but to show Mark that I had arrived. Halfway through, I noticed Lisa's expression change. She seemed to be weighing my proposal against something else, perhaps her existing relationship with Mark. I seized the moment to ask her about her experience so far. "What's been your biggest challenge with your current agency?" I inquired, leaning forward slightly. She hesitated before answering. "Honestly, I feel like I'm not being heard. It's like I'm just another client to them. I want someone who's invested in my success." That was my cue. I understand completely. Every client deserves to feel valued. That's why I make it a priority to develop a personal relationship with each one. You're not just a number, you're a partner. Together, we can achieve great things. I watched as her skepticism began to fade. We discussed her goals, her ambitions, and the pressure she faced. As I listened, I could see the light in her eyes. This was more than just business for her. It was her passion. I knew I had struck a chord. By the end of our meeting, I felt a surge of hope. Lisa was intrigued. We shook hands, and she assured me she would be in touch soon. As I walked out of the office, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. I had done it. I had not only delivered a compelling presentation but had also planted the seeds of doubt in her mind regarding Mark. The drive back to my office was filled with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. I could practically hear the clock ticking, counting down the moments until I would receive her decision. I felt like a predator waiting for its prey, and the thrill of the chase invigorated me. That evening, as I sat in my new office, I could hardly concentrate on anything else. My phone buzzed, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw Lisa's name pop up. I quickly answered, my voice steady but my mind racing. "Hey, Lisa, thanks for getting back to me so soon." "Hi. I wanted to let you know that I've thought about your proposal and I'm really impressed with what you've outlined. I'd like to move forward and discuss the next steps." I couldn't believe it. I felt a mix of relief and excitement wash over me. "That's fantastic news. I'm thrilled to hear you want to work together. When can we meet to discuss the details?" After finalizing a time to meet, I hung up and leaned back in my chair with a triumphant smile. This was it. I had successfully taken my first major client from Mark. The taste of victory was bittersweet. It felt good, but I couldn't shake the gnawing thoughts of what was still happening at home. When I got home that night, I found Jessica sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She had a distracted, distant look, and I could tell she was still reeling from our earlier confrontation. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, forcing a smile but failing to mask her unease. "It was productive," I replied casually, trying to keep my tone neutral. Inside, however, I was bubbling with excitement. "Just got a new client." "Oh, really? That's great," she said, but I could see the flicker of jealousy in her eyes. It was a stark contrast to how I had felt when she had shared her own accomplishments. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal, I said, watching her reaction closely. I think it's going to open up a lot of doors. Her smile faltered and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. So you're really going to go through with this, your own company? Why not? It's time for a change. As I spoke, I could see her face fall, realizing that I was no longer the man she had known. I was evolving, and she wasn't part of that equation anymore. I just hope you're making the right choice, she said, her tone laced with a hint of desperation. I shrugged, not wanting to engage further. I think I am. The tension in the room thickened. I could almost feel the weight of her guilt hanging between us. She had betrayed me, and now I was thriving, ready to carve out a future without her. As the days turned into weeks, my business began to flourish. I gained more clients, and each victory felt like a dagger piercing Mark's ego. I relished in the knowledge that I was outpacing him, and it was only a matter of time before he realized what was happening. Jessica continued her charade, trying to act normal while I took on more projects, but the cracks were beginning to show. She would often leave the room when I received calls from clients, her body tense, her expression unreadable. I could see the guilt eating away at her, and while I felt a pang of sympathy, it was overshadowed by the satisfaction of my revenge unfolding. Then came the day I received the call that would change everything. Mark had reached out to me, wanting to discuss some things. I could hardly contain my excitement. It was the moment I had been waiting for, and I was ready to confront him directly. The last piece of this intricate puzzle was about to fall into place, and I couldn't wait to see how it would all play out. The day Mark called felt surreal. I had spent weeks plotting my revenge, and now the moment of confrontation was finally upon me. I could feel the tension in the air as I prepared for our meeting. It was time to face the man who had stolen my wife's affections and my sense of security. I wanted to show him that I was no longer just a pawn in his game. I was the player now. When the day arrived, I arrived at the cafe where we agreed to meet a little early. I chose a table in a corner, allowing me a view of the entrance. My heart raced, not from fear but from anticipation. I envisioned the look on his face when I told him about my business success and the clients I had taken from him. This was my moment to reclaim my dignity. Mark walked in looking confident as he always did. He was dressed in his usual crisp suit, his hair carefully styled, exuding that air of superiority that had always grated on my nerves. When he spotted me, his expression shifted from casual indifference to surprise. "Hey man, good to see you," he said, extending his hand. I shook it firmly, feigning politeness. "Thanks for coming, Mark, I appreciate it," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. As we settled into our seats, I could see him scanning my face, trying to gauge how I was handling life after the bombshell revelation. I decided to cut to the chase. "So, I hear things have been tough on you lately." He raised an eyebrow, pretending to be oblivious. "Tough? What do you mean?" I leaned in, lowering my voice slightly. "Well, your clients have been reaching out to me. They're looking for a fresh perspective, and I'm happy to provide it." His expression shifted, the confidence momentarily faltering. "What are you talking about?" I couldn't help but relish the moment. "You know Lisa, she's now working with me. She felt like you were treating her like just another account. I guess she wanted someone who would actually invest in her business." Mark's face turned pale and the mask of indifference cracked. "You're lying," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back, enjoying his discomfort. "You can check with her if you don't believe me. She's excited about the direction we're taking." Mark's eyes narrowed, and I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You think you can just swoop in and take my clients? You have no idea what you're getting into." I chuckled at his attempt to regain control. "Oh, I think I do. I've spent years learning from you, Mark. You taught me everything I needed to know to succeed, and now I'm putting that knowledge to use. You've underestimated me from the beginning." He leaned forward, his expression shifting to one of desperation. "You think this is some kind of game? I'll fight you for every single one of them. You won't win." I smiled, feeling the power shift in my favor. "That's the thing, Mark. I'm not just fighting for clients, I'm fighting for my self-respect. You've taken enough from me, and now it's time for me to take back control of my life." The room felt electric as we stared each other down. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, but there was something else flickering in his eyes: fear. For the first time, I could sense that he was losing ground, and it felt exhilarating. "Don't think this won't have consequences," he warned, his voice low and threatening. "Consequences? Like what?" I shot back, my heart racing with adrenaline. "You're the one who's about to lose everything. Tell me, how does it feel to know that the tables have turned?" He opened his mouth, perhaps to lash out or threaten me further, but I wasn't interested in his empty bravado. I stood up, fixing my jacket. "I suggest you start focusing on your remaining clients while you still have them, because I'll be right behind you, taking them one by one." Walking out of that cafe felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had confronted the man who had wronged me, and I had done it on my terms. The rush of victory coursed through me like a potent elixir. I had taken the fight to him, and I had shown him that I was no longer the victim. On the drive home, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. I thought about Jessica and how she must have been feeling after my confrontation with Mark. I wondered if she realized the depth of her mistakes or if she was still stuck in her own web of deceit. When I walked into the house, I found her sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. "How did your meeting go?" she asked, not looking up from the screen. "Good," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I had a productive conversation." "About what?" "Business," I said curtly, not willing to divulge more. "Just business, that's all you care about now." She shot back, finally looking me in the eyes. There was a mix of defensiveness and curiosity in her gaze. "It's all I need to care about," I replied, feeling the frustration bubbling to the surface. "I've built something from the ground up, and it feels good to finally be in control of my life again." She opened her mouth to respond, but I could see her struggle for words. "I just want to understand what's happening with us." "What's happening is that I'm moving forward," I stated firmly. "I don't have time for games, Jessica. I'm done with the dishonesty." For a moment, we locked eyes, and I could see the realization wash over her. She understood that I was no longer the man she could manipulate or dismiss. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was done allowing her to dictate the terms of our relationship. "I can change," she said softly, her voice almost pleading. "Can you?" I replied, my tone hardening. "You've lied to me and you've betrayed my trust. I don't know if you can ever come back from that." Jessica looked away, tears pooling in her eyes. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but I quickly suppressed it. I had to stay strong. This was my moment of liberation, and I couldn't afford to let her manipulate my emotions any longer. "I'm focusing on my business and my future now," I continued, "and I'm not sure you're in that future." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting on the couch, stunned and silent. I felt a mix of sadness and relief wash over me. It was the end of an era, and while the road ahead was uncertain, I knew I was finally on the right path, one that was free from the chains of deceit and betrayal. With each step I took, I felt lighter. I was no longer defined by my past, but by the choices I was making for my future. I was ready to embrace this new chapter and whatever it held, and that included the full realization of my revenge. The final act was yet to come, and I was prepared to see it through. The following weeks were a whirlwind of transformation. My business was thriving, and I was gaining traction in ways I had never imagined. Each new client felt like another nail in the coffin of Mark's agency, and I relished every victory. I even started networking more actively, attending industry events and seminars where I could showcase my skills and build my reputation. I was no longer just a former employee. I was now a competitor, and I intended to make my mark, but with success came challenges. I was constantly in motion, meeting clients, working late nights, and making strategic decisions. The exhaustion I felt was balanced by an exhilarating sense of purpose. Every time I landed a deal, it felt like a small slice of revenge on Mark and Jessica. I was reclaiming my life, one client at a time. One evening, after a particularly productive day, I received a call from Lisa. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. I've been hearing great things about your company," she said, her tone warm and genuine. "Thanks, Lisa. I really appreciate that. Things are coming together nicely," I replied, feeling a surge of pride. "Listen, I wanted to ask you if you'd be willing to join me at an upcoming industry conference. I think it could be a great opportunity for both of us," she suggested. The thought of attending the conference with her excited me. It wasn't just about business, it was also a chance to further solidify our working relationship. Absolutely. I'd love to. Let's make it happen. We talked about the details of the conference and how we could collaborate on a presentation to showcase our combined expertise. I felt a spark of something more between us, a connection that extended beyond the professional realm. But I knew I had to tread carefully. I was still healing from the wounds Jessica had inflicted, and I didn't want to rush into anything. Meanwhile, back at home, Jessica's behavior became increasingly erratic. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could sense her desperation. She continued to attempt to engage me in conversations, trying to bridge the gap left by her betrayal. I could see her trying to change. She was making an effort to be more attentive and supportive, but the damage had already been done. One night after I returned from a meeting, Jessica was waiting for me in the living room. She looked nervous, a stark contrast to the confident woman I had once known. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, bracing myself for another round of excuses or attempts at justification. "What's on your mind?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she started slowly. "About us, about everything. I know I've hurt you and I want to apologize. I want to fix this." I looked at her, gauging her sincerity. "Fix this? Jessica, you broke my trust. It's not that simple." I know," she pleaded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I miss us." Her words struck a chord, but I quickly silenced my emotional response. "You miss what we had, but you destroyed that trust. Just saying you're sorry doesn't erase what happened." "I get that. I really do," she insisted. "I just want a chance to prove that I can change." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. I had built a new life for myself, one that was free from the deceit and betrayal I had endured. Could I really go back to the way things were? It felt impossible. "Jessica, I'm not sure I can do that. I'm in a different place now." Her face fell, and I could see the realization hit her like a wave. "So this is it then? You're really going to throw everything away?" "It's not about throwing things away. It's about moving forward," I said, my voice firm but calm. "I've worked hard to build my business and reclaim my life. I can't go back to being the person I was when I was with you." There was a long pause as we both absorbed the weight of my words. I felt an ache for what we had lost, but it was overshadowed by the clarity I had gained. "I think it's best if we go our separate ways." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded, realizing that I had made my decision. "I understand. I really do." As I walked away from that conversation, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I had finally closed the door on that chapter of my life. It would take time to fully heal, but I was ready to embrace my future. The next month flew by, and I found myself at the industry conference alongside Lisa. We shared a booth, presenting our ideas and drawing in potential clients. The energy between us was electric, and I couldn't ignore the chemistry that had been building. I found myself laughing more, engaging in discussions with newfound enthusiasm. It felt good to be appreciated for my work. At one point during the conference, as we stepped outside to catch some fresh air, Lisa turned to me with a smile. "You know, I've really enjoyed working with you. I feel like we make a great team." Her gaze held a warmth that ignited a spark in me. "I feel the same way," I said, my heart pounding. "It's been refreshing to collaborate with someone who understands the industry and shares my vision." She took a step closer, her smile growing more playful. "Maybe we could explore more than just a business partnership." In that moment, I realized that I was ready to let go of the pain of the past. The journey I had taken from betrayal to empowerment had led me here, to a place where I could embrace new possibilities. I reached out and took her hand, feeling the thrill of what lay ahead. "I'd like that." As the conference continued, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had faced my demons, confronted the betrayal, and emerged stronger than ever. I was on a path of my own making, one filled with hope, opportunity, and the promise of new beginnings. This was my story, and I was finally the one in control. I had learned that sometimes the hardest experiences lead to the greatest transformations. And as I looked at Lisa, I felt a sense of excitement for what was to come, both in business and in life. I was ready to embrace it all.